Welcome. Well, you are at home with Jim and Joy, and you are an important part of our EWTN family, and we're delighted that you have welcomed us in to your home. Well, today's live show, and we want to hear from you. We're taking your questions from our viewing audience. So if you're watching live on the broadcast, please call us at 1-800-221-9460. If you're calling and you're outside North America, you can reach us at area code 205-271-2980. You can always send us an email with your question to jimandjoy@ewtn.com, or you can reach us on Twitter at twitter.com/JimandJoyPinto. Well, today, this week's theme is going to be guidelines for relationships with in-laws. So maybe you got a great tip before you got married, or when you became an in-law, as a mother-in-law or as a father-in-law. Maybe you took your cues from your in-laws in your marriage. Lots of emotions, lots of feelings, lots of passion. And today we want to talk about that, especially with the holidays coming up, and maybe we're going to be with people for Thanksgiving, and we're all going to merge, and you want to be ahead of the game.
Well, we wrote these guidelines, 10 guidelines for relationships with in-laws sometime years ago. We shared it when we were doing radio, and it really struck a chord with so many people that were so interested. And you could always email us to get a set of the guidelines, so we'd like to send those to you if you're interested. And people just want to know them, to understand better those relationships and to be the best in-laws that they could possibly be. I want to just mention a few of them right off the bat. Honor your father and your mother, rule 1. Thoroughly discuss in-laws and meet them prior to your engagement. Leave and cleave. The marital relationship supersedes the previous family relationships. And there's 5 or 6 more that are here. So just thinking about the basic principles and guidelines. I think back to when we were dating and then when we were married, and just relationships with in-laws and relationships with your mom in particular, with me. It was a little bit of a rocky start at the beginning, and some of that was my own youth and problems and things that I did that she didn't like very much.
And some of it just was my beloved mom.
Yes, and that's the other side of it, that, and your mom and dad, we want to honor your parents, right? So you honor them no matter what. That's extended not just to your parents, but to your in-laws, to honor them, to respect them. So many positive things about your mother and your father. And time is just so important. That over the years, our relationship just got better and better and better. But there's no substitute for time, joys, sorrows, life, death, being there. And those relationships, if you give them the time, build and become beautiful, beautiful relationships in your life.
Well, and you have to make a decision going in. I never had a father-in-law or a mother-in-law, because by the time we got married, both your parents were deceased. And so I didn't have a framework for it. But we want to hear from you. You have to decide what you want to be. Do you want to be the person that's going to trouble the water of your children and their spouses? Or do you want to be the in-law that's going to blow on their sails and send them sailing and wish them well and be about enabling the best for them? We want you to call us today at 1-800-221-9460. Call if you're watching during the live broadcast today. If you call us at another time, there'll be no one to take your call. So today is the day you say, wait a minute, I got some great in-law advice, I want to share it, or maybe I didn't do this well. Can I reset, right? So can I redo this?
That's just Monday only you can call
Monday only.
I want to share one of the principles again. The marital relationship supersedes the previous relationship. That's important. The new marital relationship supersedes your previous family relationship. That's very important for parents to understand. It's important for the new couple to understand. Doesn't mean that you don't get realigned in a new way, but that the new marriage supersedes those old, that former relationship. That could be heart-wrenching and heartbreaking, but that's why men and women leave their parents, leave their family, and cling to one another and become one flesh. We want to hear from you, 1-800-221-9460. Call now. We'll be right back. Please don't go away. We're speaking in-laws. Don't go away.
Well, remember, today, Monday, on this live show, we're taking your questions. So if you're watching the live broadcast, which is today, which is Monday, we want you to give us a jingle at 1-800-221-9460. If you're calling us and you're outside North America, you can reach us at area code 205-271-2980. You can always send us an email with your question, jimandjoy@ewtn.com, or you can reach us on Twitter, twitter.com/Jim and Joy Pinto. And today we're talking guidelines for in-laws. How do we do that? I'm just going to, the guidelines are great, and you can get them from us. We can email you a copy of them, Jim and Joy Pinto at EWTN.
Jim and Joy at EWTN.com.
Right, which is really important. But, one of the things that you have to decide early on is who you're going to be, how you're going to be. I'm just telling you straight out, I couldn't be a good mother-in-law without the help of God Almighty. I'm just telling you. Why? Because all of my passions and my emotions and my feelings, be they negative or positive, are all invested. And then all of a sudden, for me...
You're invested in who?
In my children, right? And so I've been the queen in the lives of my children. I was, and they honored me, they loved me. Didn't mean they didn't hurt me, they did. But, there was great honor and respect, which you said so many times to our children. That's my wife, and you set the tone in that way. But the deal is, I couldn't do it. I couldn't be quiet. I couldn't hold my opinion. I couldn't hold my advice. I would really have to take an interior journey and depend on God Almighty to shut my mouth, that I wouldn't say the wrong thing or act in a way that wasn't right, that wasn't going to be good for them.
Let's take an email, Joy.
It says, how can some of the stereotypical problems of being an in-law be preempted? I want to get off to a good start with my future daughter-in-law. And this is Sylvia from Hot Springs, Arkansas.
Thank you, Sylvia, and that's a really good question. And one of the things we did, and you can start before this time that I'm going to say, but we met with this couple to be, or the newly married couple, and we actually sat down, just loved them, affirmed them, spoke about our relationships now that they've established a new marriage and hopefully a family. Children will come forth. And we actually shared with them the principle that we mentioned, that we understood that this new marital relationship that they have supersedes the family relationships that they came from. That's really critical. It doesn't mean that we don't have a relationship, but it gets realigned in a new way. Your new marriage, this relationship is first priority of your time, your talent, your treasure, your decision making. And we really shared that with them, that we wanted them to know that. Hopefully we would live that, that we would pray for them, we're here for them. We did also say, and I usually say when I meet with them, if we see you going off a cliff, we're going to say something.
Yes.
Okay, if you're really going off a cliff, we'll probably say it once. We're not going to nag you about this and say this is the direction for your life. But if there's something going on here that's not helpful and it's really egregious, and we see it and sometimes you don't, we're going to say that. But we're not going to be nagging or anything like that. And we respect you and this relationship and the authority of this relationship, and that you've left our families. You're establishing a family. And you're going to experience this too. There's going to come a time your children, Lord willing, will leave and cleave, and you have to let them go.
Right.
You have to let them become the family that they're called to be. You'll still have a place in there to speak. We hope that you'll call on us, but we hope that the priority will be you're calling on us more than we're calling on you to tell you what to do.
Well, and it's hard emotionally because your children have been dependent on you emotionally for their affirmation, for their counsel, for their guidance all these years. And now you have to steer them to the other. You have to steer them to their spouse. Our daughters are very dependent on you, Jim, for spiritual and emotional strength. And we have to say, you have a husband, and your husband takes that place now. And that's a painful adjustment, but you have to lead them. If I call and invite my daughters over for dinner or something, they'll say, oh yeah, we're coming. And I'll say, no, ask your husband if it's good for him. See, make sure he doesn't have anything on his calendar. And it's because you have to direct them back to that relationship, which is so important.
That's right. Another email.
It says, my daughter shares with me shortcomings and selfish decisions of my son-in-law. These sharings become a burden to me and color the way I feel about him. When I revisit these issues with my daughter, I often find that they have moved past these problems, but I still remain very present to me. And this is Natalie from Boston, Massachusetts. So true.
That's a common, sometimes continual problem, that our kids are now married, but they share with mom, they share with dad negative things about the other spouse. You know, you can't help sharing general things or maybe a little disappointment or whatever, but you know, when you really start getting down into the grass there and you're sharing on and on, it's just really not helpful for the parents.
Right.
And like this person, you know, was saying, that oftentimes when the parent goes to readdress this, so what's going on with Tom or Mary, and you told me this, so often they're like, well, we worked, it's great. When was that, Mom? You know, when was that?
Right.
So you're holding on to this. Meanwhile, they've worked through this, or everything is okay with this. And, you know, it's just not, it's not fair. You shouldn't be the chief, you know, consultant to them. And that's where they need to learn, if you're modeling it, that you go to confession, that you have, you know, some retreats for marriage in the family, that you have a spiritual guide possibly, you have other couples that you might share with. And you've got to say to Susie or to Bobby, I can't be your primary person that you're telling me everything about your spouse about. You know, right. I'm so concerned. I love you. I'm here for you. But you know, you need other people that you can actually share and work this through, because it colors the way I see.
And
everything.
Sometimes not just colors, but it contaminates. And so now, and they have marital grace that you don't have as an in-law, right? So they have marital grace to forgive each other. They have marital grace and they reset and they're good. But meanwhile, your view, your opinion, it's been contaminated. And so you just don't get past it. That's why it's best not to entertain it. So that's where you could say, don't, and we've said this up front, don't tell us the negative things about them, because that's not good for me. He's my son-in-law, he's my daughter-in-law, and I want to love them unconditionally. Like you said, unless there's a great problem where they'll come to you with concern and say, how can we get past this? And then we give guidance and direction, but usually it's back then with the spouse present, so that the spouse doesn't feel like we're ganging up on them, you know, either, which is good.
So we'd like for you to give us a call now. So many of you call, maybe you've just got a story you want to tell about being an in-law, or you've got a question, or how the relationship over time developed, you know, with your in-laws. We want to hear from you. The phone number's up. Just give us a call, shoot us off an email. We want to hear from you.
Well, this is Lorene on the phone right now. Lorene, welcome to At Home with Jim and Joy. Your question or your comment?
Well, good morning. I can't believe I'm on the air.
You
are.
It's not a question. I survived 67 years of marriage before my husband, bless his heart, went to heaven. But I had the world's worst mother-in-law. I kid you not. And so I tried to become a real good mother-in-law to, anyway, there's 56 of us in the family now, so I had a lot of practice. But the only thing that got me through finally was good Catholic therapy and a Catholic priest and a counselor, and because his mother were so mean to some of our children. Some of them they loved, some of them they didn't, and we couldn't have celebrations for just 3 of them instead of 7. Right. You know how that goes. So anyway, I was finally advised, if you can't get along with them, be sensible and get along without them.
Well, and that's the part of knowing the boundaries, right? Yeah. You have to put boundaries. If it's not helpful and it's toxic in that way, or they pick and choose who they want to celebrate and who they don't, and if it's a constant toxic environment, no matter what you do, she isn't going to change, then you set boundaries.
But the key, I think it was Lorene.
Yes.
Is that she just didn't stay alone and stew in this or really get angry. She got help. She got support. She had a priest. She had other people, and she wasn't alone in this. She could bounce this off them and say, is this normal what's happening with my mother? Is it me? Is it her? How do I work through this? And sometimes people just don't change.
They're not
and it's like, so how can I not be hateful and accept her as a flawed human being like I am and just will the best for her? you do that through accompaniment, people supporting you through this, and giving you advice and counsel.
Well, and Laureen, you know, I think she did a very wise thing. And I can remember the only example I had was my mom. Now, I love my mom dearly, but my mom was not the best mother-in-law. And what my mother taught me was how not to be a mother-in-law. That's what I learned from her. And what, to my mother's fault, she just really believed in her heart that nobody else on the planet was good enough for her children. She just really believed that.
She did.
She just did. And so no matter what you did, if you were the best son-in-law, the best daughter-in-law, she was going to have an issue with you. And she wasn't going to change till her dying
But you know,
breath.
but that's the new family relationship
Right.
supersedes the old one. You'll always be mother. Nobody could take the place of mother. But these kids have to leave and cleave, and you can't manipulate the situation to make it difficult for them. So that giving over is just critical. And if you don't do that, it really can hurt and hinder and contaminate the relationship. Another email.
It says, I have little to no communication with my son and daughter-in-law as it breaks my heart. I don't want to unduly influence their personal life and marriage, but I would like to have some regular communication and interaction. Am I expecting too much? And this is Regina from Garden City, Kansas.
I would say, no, you're not expecting too much. You know, we've really underlined the leaving, the cleaving, the new relationships superseding. But it doesn't mean ugliness. It doesn't mean like we don't have to speak to you ever again or anymore. There should be a new realignment. You should have a place within the hearts of your family members, your in-law and your son or daughter. You should expect to hear from them, and you should make that known as best you can. And if something's broken down there in terms of speaking, you can always write them. And I've heard from numerous, parents who say, if I've done anything, or if there's anything, and I've said that to them,
right.
Please let me know, or I ask your forgiveness. I love you, son, and I love you. I'm not trying to be your key component in family. I understand you have a wife and children. And, I'd say to children out there, especially this holiday season, pick up the phone and call your mother, your father, your grandma, your grandpa. Be big enough to let some things go if at all possible, if there really doesn't have to be some kind of firm boundary for some extreme reason, and love them while you still have them. They're just human beings limping along the way, just like you, and you have to be students of your parents to understand what was their upbringing and what happened, and how are they living today. So the guidelines go on and on. We hope that you'll get the guidelines. There's 10 guidelines for in-laws, and a lot of people find it helpful. We may continue this on another Monday, but we'll be right back. Plenty more to come. Please don't go away.
Show. We're going to go to Rome to check in with Joan Lewis. Now, Joan, we have a new saint. Saint Pope Paul VI was canonized yesterday.
Well, greetings from Rome. I think you all know that yesterday, Sunday, in a sun-splashed St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis canonized 7 blesseds, including, of course, Pope Paul VI and murdered Salvadoran Archbishop Oscar Romero, who was a spiritual hero for many millions of people. Today, a little departure from my usual format, because I'd like to share 2 stories with you about the first Pope I ever spoke to, the new saint, Paul VI. Now, the first happened in 1974. I had just moved to Rome to begin working for the Rome campus of St. Mary's of Notre Dame program. And a friend asked me if I would like to attend a papal audience. Well, that certainly was a no-brainer. So I was very excited and found out the audience was going to take place in a very beautiful modern hall in Castel Gandolfo, a building, by the way, later given to the Focolare movement by John Paul. Now, I was absolutely stunned beyond telling when I was brought into the audience hall, much smaller than the one in Rome, and I was brought right up to the front row on the right-hand side. And I was literally several meters from the Holy Father when he spoke. Now, I was really enthralled by everything, but especially by the fact that the Pope used the pontifical we instead of saying I, and also the fact that he spoke several languages when addressing the crowd. Now, the throne that he was on, it was a chair on a base. It was actually a portable throne, not just a chair. And the sediari, the chair bearers, at the end of the audience, they came in and they had two long red velvet-covered poles that they inserted under the base of the chair, and they began to lift the Pope up. And all of a sudden, we began to gasp because the Pope apparently wasn't aware he was being lifted. He seemed to have spotted somebody in the crowd, and he started to get up out of the chair. Well, of course, the sediari put the throne down right away. The Pope got out, and he walked over right to where I was seated. And there he was in the front row. He had spotted the daughter of a diplomat that he knew, and so he started speaking to her. And hey, why not? He was there, so he spoke to the rest of us in the row. And when he came over to me, he said in Italian, asked where I was from. I answered in Italian, said the United States, and he greeted me and said a few things in English. And of course, I have forgotten them all, except for the moment. That was historic and memorable, as you can hear right now. Now, not long after that, I was working during the week in Rome for the Rome office of the New York Times. And on weekends, I was the private secretary to American Cardinal John Wright, who was prefect of the Congregation for Clergy. Now, it was during a Holy Week. My boss called me in. It was Good Friday. He called me in and he said, Joan, I have a favor to ask you, very unusual. If you don't want to do it, just tell me. He said he had heard the Thursday, Holy Thursday, that something had happened, perhaps a mini stroke, to Pope Paul VI during Mass. And he said, would I be willing to go to Cardinal Wright and ask him to confirm this news? And I said I would. I called his secretary. He set aside 10 minutes of time for me. And Cardinal Wright did confirm the news, but he said, quote, you did not hear this from me, unquote. Well, I went back to the New York Times office, told my boss those very words, and to his credit, he did not do the story. The New York Times at the time, for such a story, such an important story, required 3 independently verifiable sources. So I have to say, of course, I did meet the Pope several times after that, but in any event, a lot of things have changed today, certainly the news world, as you can probably tell. But anyway, time's up here as usual, so back to you at home.
Joan, thanks so much for sharing such personal reflections and sentiments, and that means so much to really bring it home in a personal way. Hope that you've enjoyed today the guidelines for relationships with in-laws. We all have in-laws, or we are in-laws. And I think I want to emphasize a couple as we part. Take your in-laws into your heart and accept them as human beings, as people on a journey. Really important. There's going to be so many maybe disappointments there. We heard from one call in today that said, you know, she just continued in a mean way. Look for the face of Christ in them. That's critical. And if there are things that they've done that aren't helpful or are hurtful, pray for them. Pray for their soul and for the change that God desires in their life. And again, many times over months and weeks and years, relationships change. And like I said at the beginning, your mom and I weren't well established at the beginning, but I was there at her death. Your grandmother had a hard time with me as well. I was there as she was dying. And it's amazing as time goes by how relationships can change.
Right, and that's why you always have to be about love, be about forgiveness, be about what God wants for the relationship, not what you want, not what you desire, not like a holding resentment. And they once said this to me, and I'm not going to let it go. Let it go. Be totally practicing your own interior life, that you're full of love, that you're full of joy, and that you're full of healing, which is so important. My goal is to be the best mother-in-law on the planet. Now, I hope I'm her, but I work at that. And I work at saying to them, if I did anything to you, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say it that way or do it that way. My intention wasn't to hurt you. And that's never my intention with anybody. So we really have to be working at keeping our hearts pure and holy and blameless before them.
Your daughters-in-law and sons-in-law have said very good things about you, so I think we're doing okay. It's been wonderful to be with you today. We're family, as Mother Angelica always said. You're an important part of this EWTN family, and you are always at home with Jim and Joy. God bless you, and God bless all of your loved ones. Keep it on EWTN. Bye now.